I was about $40,000 in debt. And I made a decision. I'm like, I'm going to sell all my stuff in Scottsdale and I'm going to go places for the next 2 years for like 90 days.
Hi, welcome to the Winners Find a Way show and podcast with your host, Trent M. Clark, 3-time World Series coach, CEO of Leadershipity, serial entrepreneur, having started 12 companies, coach to the 1%, and an international speaker. This show is going to be your go-to podcast for facing adversity, being inspired, and overcoming obstacles, all from the best in the world, business, sports, and leadership. Hate the crappy ingredients in many beverages and energy drinks? Rebellious Infusions are the go-to functional beverage. They have 5 or fewer plant-based organic ingredients, no sugar, no calories, loaded with antioxidants to boost your immune system, and L-theanine for brain health. Rebellious Infusions are available at drinkrebellious.com. Rethink your drink. For 10% off of your next purchase, use the code 99999.
It can be amazing. We can connect with our friends from high school and have deep relationships with people while you're all around the world, right? Like 30 years ago, that wasn't possible. My niece to be able to FaceTime her while I'm in Peru or like FaceTime my parents, right? Like, so there are absolutely amazing things. We've turned into this global community. It also disconnects us. Right? Like, what is our core purpose of being human? And some could say it's love. Some could say it's connection. One of the things that I've really been thinking about, like for the last 5 years since connection has been, say my word, love over the last 2,000 years has been, for lack of a better term, like used to potentially kill people. Well, I'm doing this in the name of love. I'm serving my God and I'm doing this for love. And so, or like a parent goes to their kid, I'm only punishing you because I love you. And it's like, how does that make sense? Like, you're punishing me because you love me? And so really the way that I look at it is I believe like the word for, say, the next 2,000 years is going to be connection, right? Like when you and I, Trent, are connected, we could label that as love. We could label that as joy. We could label that as whatever we want. Yet we both know when we're connected. And that for me, and like a lot of my work with entrepreneurs, is we've become so connected to our work and disconnected from what makes us human, whether it's our bodies, whether it's our families, and to really reset. And that for me, it's why I wrote The Connection Effect. And, how do we, and this goes back to like the question that you asked me, what was like the most pivotal moment, right? Like, because part of the connection, the main aspect is the connection that we have with ourselves, right? Like, are we doing those self-loving things? Are we journaling? Are we exercising? Are we eating well? And how, like, in order for me to connect to you, I have to be connected to myself.
I do see where people pour into everyone else and leave nothing in the cup left for themselves, right? And there's that, wow, I wonder if people know I'm struggling, but they would never show that on the outside because when they're good at connecting for others, and they've kind of left themselves out of that connection. And so their health is waning, their mental health, their moral health, their conditioning is dropping. And it's all for others, and it's alarming. And I think it's dangerous. Let me jump into from the 4 disciplines of execution. Chris McChesney and Sean Covey had a quote in the book that says, "Winners, when shown data that they are losing, find a way to win." So let's take you back to a little bit of your background that allowed you to become one of the best at your craft, an author, an influencer, and all these dynamics of executive leadership and in their lives. Was there a time that you were just down, up against it, losing, but you found a way, come back and win? Down but not out. Talk to me about one of those examples. I mean, there may be a few, right, in our lives here along the way. Give me one good example for that for you.
I've always been on top, Trent. Like, come on.
Always. It's been easy the whole way.
Yeah, just gumbos, rainbows and gumdrops. So actually about 2 years ago, I'd ended a very serious live-in relationship, had managed to leave a business partnership that was very successful and just like try different things and couldn't get things to work. I was about $40,000 in debt. And I made a decision. I'm like, I'm going to sell all my stuff in Scottsdale and I'm going to go places for the next 2 years for like 90 days. And the first place that I went was Cincinnati, Ohio. So my friend's like, yeah, just watch my kid for a couple hours, like after he gets out of school and I come home from work and you can live here for free. So I'm like, all right. So I didn't really have to pay rent. I was taking cash off of credit cards to pay other credit cards. So I was, I managed to get myself $40,000 in debt and just like wasn't getting the results that I wanted, and like was trying to start some communities and nothing was really taking off. So I ended up collaborating with one of my friends and running his mastermind. And in like 3 months, I paid off all my debt, and really was one of those moments and points where it's like, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to not have to do everything yourself, and to really lean into others. That was a very interesting experience and allowed me to travel around the world for the last 2 years and, pay off all my debt and have clients who are, running billion-dollar companies, and, other clients that are big name clients that have been able to help their businesses grow because I made a different decision.
I love that. What do you think when you think, Gordy, about your superpower? What's the thing that separates you from others and catapults you to work with these top level folks? And what is that one thing that you think separates?
One, it's 100 things. Come on, I'm incredible. I think
I do
one
know that.
is
I
really,
know that, by the way.
I almost want to say two things.
Okay.
One is
Let's
to
say
just be able to like really connect with people in a deep, meaningful way, like cutting across like the superficial aspects. And the other piece is helping them envision a bigger future for themselves.
Okay. So let's take this first one. If I want that deep, authentic connection with people, and you can establish that quickly, because you are an expert at that. What are some of the things I need to do? What are some of those things that I need to be able to do well to establish that, besides take my phone out of my hand and actually listen, eye contact? What we call that, in EO, we actually do this in mentorship, right? And so we call it solar listening. So what are some of those things that I need to do to connect well?
Like you said, taking the phone off. And a large part is, and this goes back to Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, is just like a genuine interest, right? And asking meaningful questions or different questions instead of like, hey, how was your day? What are you most excited about? Or asking kind of like some from an employee perspective, right? It's like, hey, how can we improve? How can we get better? And I think this is a lot of leaders that I see, they don't necessarily lean on their teams to solve some of these problems. And like the teams are on the ground level, so they know some of these problems that are happening, right? So it's really just like genuinely being present and caring about people. And one of the questions that one of my friends gives me a hard time is like, instead of it's like, hey, how are you? It's like, hey, how are you, Trent? Or like, how is Trent, right? And even just asking that question gets you to check in a little bit different. And then like, you could give me a little bit of a superficial answer. And then it's like, okay, no, really, how are you?
I like the idea
and this
of
is
using the name to personalize, right? Because how are you, Trent? How are you, Gordy? Like when you personalize it, because everyone says, hey, how are ya? How are ya? It doesn't feel personalized. It doesn't feel like anyone really wants to know, right? I think I've done that before where people say, hey, how are you? And I'm like, oh, well, my whole market's crashing and I'll probably be broke by 5 o'clock. Like, okay, hey, good to see you. You're like, right. Like, they don't really care.
And that's ultimately like, how do you ask the question a little bit differently, right? And this goes back to like how the brain works, right? Like we're just so used to the same responses. And now just like, and this goes back to the social media and all the news, like we've become numb to a lot of things. It's part of being human is experiencing the ups and the downs, right? Like, and especially during COVID and kind of like mental health and we were talking about anxiety earlier, it's like, I might be able to help you see a different perspective, right? And another aspect is like, do these people really want help? Do they want to change? Or do they want to just watch 10 hours of Netflix tonight and be okay at being addicted to that?
Another addiction, right? So let's talk about your second superpower, which is, creating that stretch of a vision, like what's possible. And maybe something even like I hadn't even considered myself. Talk about like for us that want something more, and we see that our potential's out there to do some things and influence others, and we're driven for that. What are some of the things we need to be thinking about to really stretch our vision for ourselves and our teams and our organizations?
I think one aspect is really like how to just 10x, right? Like I was talking to a client the other day and he just found out his wife is pregnant. And so he's working 70, 80 hours a week and scaled very quickly from 2 years ago, no employees, to now 120 employees in 2 years, right? And so we were like discussing, okay, how do you get your business down to 20 hours a week? So you can be present with your kid. You have basically 7 months to do this. And so even that thought exercise versus like, okay, how do I go from 50 hours to 40 hours? Like, you're really not going to think differently. But if you have to basically remove yourself from your business, you're going to be thinking different. And that's part of, building that ideal future, right? It's like, what does your ideal future look like? And this is where we work with a lot of executives, and they're like, well, I just want to spend more time with my family. And it's like, but are your actions in alignment with that?
Gordy, are you there? I think we lost you for a second. So you said, like, I think we lost you right when you said he's got the business, like, he's lying in bed thinking like, okay, how are we really going to do this? Like, you're going to have a new family, and he's already scaled like, through the roof quickly. What's the vision? What's the mindset of someone in that situation?
Yeah. So like the mindset is, how do you basically remove yourself from your business? How do you go from 80 hours a week down to 20? And when you have to think through it from that perspective, you're going to come up with drastically different solutions than how do I go from 60 to 50 hours? What are the pieces that I can take off my schedule? And this goes back to like a lot of your work is like, what are your core values, right? Like, is your core value business ahead of family? Okay, well then, like, that's a decision. You mentioned earlier, Stephen Covey. One of the stories I remember, his daughter and him, they were in San Francisco, and they had like a whole day planned, and he ran into one of his clients. His client's like, we're going to this dinner, and like, we'd love for you and your daughter to come. And Stephen's like, no. And his daughter's like, why did you say no to that? Because I've made a promise and commitment to you that we're going to go to this adventure. And even like, family is more important to me than work. And so here's an opportunity.
That's so good. Let's talk real quickly about, you've been through a number of things. You've been through rehabilitating yourself. You've been through debt. You've been through, I'm sure, family challenges like most of us. So tell me a little bit about, when things get hard for people, what's the one belief, value, or action you would recommend to others on their journey when things get hard? Many of us have spent down in, we've lost a job, we've lost something, and it's woe is me, and can spend months in depression or even years in the hard times and the victimhood of it all, of what happened, and it's all somebody else. But is there something that you think, what would you recommend right away for someone to get back and regulate after a hard moment?
So for me, one of the main aspects is just mentors and calling on my support network, and it's really going back to like, what are those core principles, right? Like, what are the daily things that allow me to be successful? And part of going through these struggles is like, you don't want to journal. You don't want to exercise. You don't want to eat clean. You don't want to pick up the phone, and like we've discussed many times before, like part of it, like, what is the conversation I'm having with myself? How do I become more gentle on myself? How do I not beat myself up? How do I be more patient? And all these are things that are very easy in practice, like very easy concepts, but very difficult in practice. And so, especially when we're not feeling 100%, how do we love ourselves? And ultimately, like what we were talking about with the connection effect, how do we go back and connect? And usually from my experience, like something's off, right? Like, it's a relationship, it's work, it's like, there's something that I'm not willing to face.
This is kind of transcends into the next question, which is, I like to ask a lot of people, because you see a lot of really smart people who are well accomplished. When people look in the mirror, what is something like that you might see on their reflection that they don't seem to be able to see in themselves in that mirror? What do you think that they're overlooking, that, or they're either ignoring, or what do you think that is?
I'm going to spin this a little bit different. I was recently running an event with 30 of the top business leaders in the world, right? Like, all running businesses over $5 million up to, I think one of the guys had like a $500 million company. And we asked the room, who in here struggles with imposter experience? Like, today's going to be the day they figure out I'm not as smart, I'm not as successful, And out of those 30 people, how many hands went up that they struggle with imposter experience, Trent?
My guess is all 30. Did you get that, Gordy?
Exactly.
Yep.
Every single hand went up. And so back to your question, we all struggle to see our own greatness. Like, and a different way is like, what we're world class at, we think everyone can do. Like, I think everyone can connect. Oh, that's easy.
We know that's not, well, we probably know in theory that that's true, that everyone could do it, but we also know that it's very intentional and a lot of work and a lot of distraction and a lot of temptation and a lot of pulling us a lot of different directions. So while it is what you said earlier, simple, it's not easy, right? It's simple. Like, hey, just put your phone down and connect, right? Like, engage in the conversation. But if it were that easy, we'd all be doing it, and we're not doing it. You copy me okay?
And that, like, sometimes the easiest things are the most difficult. I think as a society, and maybe COVID has been a bit of a reset, is what is really important. And what, if we're doing all these things, is it really important? Is it essential? Back to the Pareto's principle, right? Like, who are the 20% of your clients that drive 80% of your revenue? What are 20% of the activities that drive 80% of your revenue? And how to, like, I look at social media, I've gotten a couple of clients from social media, but like when I was doing a lot of speeches, that wasn't how I was getting speeches. Like, I was getting speeches because I was reaching out to people like you. And I was like, hey, will you introduce me to EO Chicago Learning Chair? Okay, yeah, cool. Yeah. It wasn't what I posted on Facebook. It was relationships.
Referral. That's so good. What do you think? I mean, you've had a lot of success, Gordy. You've also had a lot of challenges. What's the best battle that you've conquered in your lifetime?
That's an easy one. Next question. Just sobriety, the addiction piece,
okay.
Right? Like, now 11 years clean and sober, and maybe not all the successes in my life, because I had some successes before I started using drugs, but everything goes back to that decision. Right? Like, working with billionaires, knowing cool people like you, it all comes back to my sobriety.
Okay. And did you go through like a 12-step program to rehabilitate? Did you do anything different that was not normal, not the normal way?
Nothing really about me is normal. Yeah. So I went to a treatment center.
I love about you.
I went to a treatment center in San Francisco. When I went to, so it's kind of like it's almost like a two-prong. I had decided not to use drugs, but then I started struggling with mental health. And so I was taking some antipsychotics. So I went to a treatment facility to get off of those medications. And so it wasn't 12-based. I personally don't resonate with 12-step. It only has about a 10% success rate. So I like stacking the odds in my favor a little bit more. And that being said, it's helped millions of people get sober, but also a lot of people haven't gotten sober with it. You impacted enough lives. So my recovery program was kind of like throw everything at the wall and see what works and doesn't. And for me, even now, I spend 2 hours a day working on my recovery, right? And we could label that as personal development. We could label that as exercise, meditation, mindfulness. So I had a very unconventional, but one of the aspects that I really love is Gabor Mate talks about this. Is like, the question we're asking is why the addiction, when the question we should be asking is why the pain. And so how do we go in and deal with that pain? And how do we process that? Which the journey I'm still on, right? Like, it's part of why I came to Peru, to continue walking home and continue going within.
Does the pain always precede the addiction?
I haven't thought about it from that perspective. And so I think you could change the word pain with trauma.
Okay.
But I would say, from my experience, there is some kind of pain or trauma, and we don't know how to deal with that. We don't know how to change the way that we feel. So we turn to these substances. They make us feel a little bit better, right? Like, whether it's social media addiction, whether it's alcoholism, drugs, just
Netflix,
feel a little different.
Well, and when I look at the friends that I know, and I think there's very few people who I haven't seen in my life deal some level of addiction, whether it's food, work. I mean, work's a common addiction that almost gets praised in our society, right? And it's a mask of some pain, of regret. I find the pain of regret is very chronic. And I think about, professional sports and someone who finally got that 1% opportunity to have a pro contract and the chance and really kind of mucked it up, right? And it's that woulda, coulda, shoulda pain of regret that I wish I would have done something different. And that pain becomes so strong that the addiction just numbs it for a while, right? Whatever the addiction they choose, it numbs that pain for a short period. The problem is you still wake up with me, I'm still back with me again, and I still have the pain. So when until my next time I can numb it again? Because it turns out the pain kind of follows me. I don't run from it, and my only chance is to numb it, right? So it doesn't work like I'd hoped it would, and yet the cycle begins and ends and begins again, and it just kind of dog chasing the tail. right?
Yeah, as a lot of this conversation is, how do we become best friends with ourselves, right? And how do we be the advocate for ourselves? And I got this lesson during COVID is I did a 3-day water fast and silent retreat at the same time. So basically 3 days, not talking and not eat. And my biggest takeaway from it is like, shit, I got to be best friends with myself. Like, I'm not getting, like, this voice isn't going to go away.
Yeah.
And I can either use that voice to be an advocate for myself, or I can use it to destroy myself. And even like, and knowing this and practicing this are two drastically different things.
Yes.
And so how do we use it to our advantage? How do I love myself? How do I connect with myself? How do I, if something is going wrong, or not the way I want, how do I change?
I love it. Awesome, Gordy. Share again your social media real quick.
Yeah, so it's Gordon Buffton, or email is gb@geniuscreators.org. But yeah, I'd love, hit me up what you like from this conversation, what you didn't like from this conversation. If you're using technology a little bit less, and just really, remember how to connect.
Love that. I had a couple great things, like in my notes here. The average of the 5 people you spend time with, right? Past is, being lost in the past will create depression, and the anxiety is lost in the future. The deep connection, and I know what we have to do really is all get your book, right? That's what we have to get is the connection effect. Hold that up for us again. The connection effect, like being present, being genuine, actually caring for others. And I know that's still part of a program, that's usually part of almost all addiction, is that generosity and connecting and caring for others, not about me all the time, and developing that, and then creating that stretch vision, that 10X. And what do we really want? That stretch of moving something from like 80 to 20 hours. And how do you do that? Because it looks totally different. You're going to have to think in a different way. And then, of course, why the pain? I love that question. Why the pain? Where is the pain from? And really diving into that. And then finally, being best friends with yourself. Just all really high quality advice for everyone out there. Follow the show on YouTube Live, LinkedIn Live, Facebook Live. We also have our podcast on all major networks: Apple, Spotify, Google Cast, all of the good ones, all the great ones. So whatever medium you're using, please follow us at the Leadershipity channel on YouTube. I am at Leadershipity, or Trent M. Clark on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. LinkedIn's probably our biggest handle and exposure. And of course, we are at leadershipity.com. Make sure that you look for our upcoming book, The Pyramid of Leadershipity: Accountability for Leaders. Super excited about this project. DM or email me about this show. Anything you want me to connect you to Gordy, happy to do it. Let me know what you think about this show. Please rate Winners Find a Way 5 stars. We work hard to find value delivering stories from the top 1%, like Gordy just delivered with great stuff. Lastly, we're going to finish, Gordy, with do you have a go-to verse or quote or something when things are challenging for you? Do you have something like that kind of verse, a quote that kind of regulates you right away, like that sets you back into level ground and can balance you? Do you have something like that?
I first read it when I was 16 years old. It was like before school. It was actually a leadership council. Be the change you wish to see in the world.
I love that. Be the change you wish to see in the world. That's profound. So every week on our show, I like to consider the guest that's coming on, and I pray about this during the week, and I get excited about who's coming in. And I was led this week to, I'm a Bible reader, I'm a Christian guy, and I was led to Proverbs 22 to 24 in what they call the 30 sayings of the wise. And man, this jumped out at me. Proverbs 23, saying number 12, or 23:12. It says, apply your heart to instruction and your ears to words of knowledge. And I mean, I just thought of you. Man, that's Gordy. Like, he's applied his heart to this instruction. He instructs others. He's always learning. He's sponging. His ears are open to the words of knowledge. And yet you have customers that their ears are open to your words of knowledge. And I just thought, man, that's so prevalent for what I always think of when I think about our relationship and our time together. I'm honored to call you friend, Gordy. It's been a cool time over the last 5-6 years, getting to know you even better. And we met in a cool way, halfway across the world. And so I'm really blessed and thankful. And we've seen some crazy things in our relationship, right? Like partners passing. I mean, some really bizarre things. And I think it's only furthered our relationship and authenticated the fact that challenges exist. and we got to go through these things and we do them better together. So I'm thankful.
It's been fun. Super grateful for you, how you show up in the world, how you show up in my life. I always know I could call you and get a little bit of inspiration just by how enthusiastic you are about life.
Love it.
We need more people like that. So.
Thank you. For everybody else, please join us next week, every Friday, 12:30 Eastern, 9:30 a.m. Pacific on the Winners Find a Way show. Broadcast on all the networks. Look for our Winners Find a Way show podcast on all the major networks. Please rate us 5-star, like us, subscribe us, and we'll see you next time on the Winners Find a Way show.
Need to hydrate but tired of plain old water? You need Rebellious Infusions. No sugar, no calories, loaded with antioxidants to boost your immune system. And L-theanine for brain health. 10 organic flavors and convenient liquid packets. Just add 16 ounces and you are on your way. Rethink your drink at drinkrebellious.com. For 10% off of your next purchase, use the code 99999. Thank you for listening to the Winners Find a Way show and podcast. Trent, together with the leaders who shared their learning and experiences through this show, are grateful for allowing them to help and support you on your journey to becoming your best. Write a review, rate us 5 stars, and share this episode to your network.